His computer. Hi, and welcome to the Beyond Social Media Show. I'm BL Achman, and the Beyond Social Media Show is the podcast for marketing, advertising, and digital communication specialists. And to find us, just search Beyond Social Media Show, or tell your smart speaker, play Beyond Social Media Show, and you'll find us. And I'm here today with Drew Simon, who's the founder of Crypto Altruism. And we're going to discuss how crypto is being used and how it can be used for social impact. So just to give you a little background on Drew, he's a social impact and technology enthusiast. He's got 10 years of leadership experience in nonprofit and higher education. He has served as a senior leader, director, and advisor for multiple nonprofit organizations and has helped charities around the world secure millions in funding to support their missions. Most recently, with his interest in blockchain and crypto, he is focused on the impact that cryptocurrency can play in social impact, and that led to the launch of cryptoaltruism.org, which is a blog and a community of practice and is dedicated to communicating the social impact use cases of crypto and blockchain. Thank you so much for being here. I'm excited about our conversation, Drew.
Yeah, it's a pleasure, and thank you so much for having me, BL. I really appreciate it.
So on your website, it says we aim to bring attention to the great projects already making use of this technology for social good and to envision the endless future use possibilities. We believe we barely scratch the surface of what this technology can do. And so explain a little bit about your website and its goals and its mission.
Absolutely. And thank you again for having me. Really excited to be here. So yeah, crypto altruism is really about, when it comes to cryptocurrency and blockchain, you usually see a lot of the negative stuff that's going on in the space. There's certain perceptions about it. But I think what's really exciting is it really is a revolutionary technology that I think will completely disrupt the way that charities fundraise, that NGOs distribute aid. And I think that there's just so much potential positive use cases in the space to make the world a better place. And so my goal through crypto altruism is to highlight these amazing use cases, some of these projects that are already underway, and to help bridge the gap between the charitable space, the social impact space, and cryptocurrency and blockchain. So, whereas a lot of the blogs out there and stuff focus more on the investment stuff, I don't do any financial advice or anything like that. I just focus on, how this technology can be used to make the world a better place. And there's so many great charities that are already using it. There's so many amazing projects and startups that are coming up with innovative and novel ways to use this technology to support vulnerable populations and to address real world issues all over the globe. So that's kind of what we do, is we just shine a light on that, share it, and bring together a community around this vision that crypto and blockchain can be the next, force and generational disruptor of the space.
I was reading your 100th blog post, which highlights 100 projects that use cryptocurrency for social impact. So tell us, what are some of those most impactful projects that you're seeing?
Yeah, so I think that, there are like literally hundreds or thousands of amazing projects working on it. And I think, there are some that are, they're really in the infancy, some that are more established. Some of the more established kind of projects, I guess you could say, or groups, one that surprised a lot of people is UNICEF, one of the largest NGOs in the world that is making use of cryptocurrency and blockchain for good. They have a crypto fund where they distributed, I think, somewhere close to $5.5 million US to a number of different projects that are using blockchain technology to create accessible financial services, to create things like insurance platforms to deliver insurance to those that are underinsured, to help distribute aid. So there's a number of amazing organizations through that platform. One of the leaders in the space when it comes to charitable giving from a crypto point of view is definitely the Giving Block. They are, I think, on track this year to distribute about $100 million in crypto donations to charities. So they're one of the largest facilitators of cryptocurrency donations, and are looking at 1 billion in projected crypto to flow through their platform in 2022, which is exciting. So those are a couple. Impact Market is one that comes to mind, which is a decentralized poverty alleviation platform where communities can, together decide how funds are allocated and distributed for projects such as unconditional basic income. So it's hard to kind of pick just a few out because there's just so much good being done in this space. But really, I think when it comes to cryptocurrency, blockchain, and social impact, you can kind of break it down into a few, key areas. And one of them is fundraising and charitable giving. So donating with cryptocurrency. It opens you up to a whole new base of donors, a new generation of individuals that are interested in transparency, that are interested in, open source, and that are really donating a lot of money through crypto to different charitable organizations. And there are hundreds of organizations that accept crypto donations. So not only UNICEF, like I mentioned, but Save the Children, the American Cancer Society, United Way Worldwide. So there's so many great organizations that are accepting cryptocurrency donations. Sorry, go ahead.
Well, I want to take a step back because there's, how shall I put this politely, a lack of understanding among marketers in what crypto is and how it may apply to marketing, and particularly how it might apply to this area. So how is crypto actually used and what makes it good? When you say donating crypto, what does that mean? How do they then use the crypto?
Yeah, so in terms of cryptocurrency at its core, cryptocurrency is backed by what's called blockchain, which is a distributed ledger of essentially transactions that are taking place that are verified by a peer-to-peer network to make sure that there's no sort of tampering or fraud that's taking place. And so then these individuals that are verifying it, in the case of Bitcoin, the miners get given cryptocurrency as a reward. And so Bitcoin was originally developed as the first kind of peer-to-peer cash system, but really cryptocurrencies are often, in cryptocurrency, the word currency itself often, is a funny one because a lot of people don't agree with that it is a currency, right? It's more of kind of like an asset class in a sense. And so charities are actually accepting cryptocurrency donations such as Bitcoin or Ethereum or any number of cryptocurrencies. And there's a couple of things they can do with it. They can store it in what would be called their wallet and keep it as kind of an investment in a sense, right? Allow for it to grow. And then cash it out when they please, sell it on the open market, and then use that cash to support their mission. But a lot of charities, to make sure that they can secure the value of the donation and avoid any sort of fluctuations and volatility, that will sign up for certain platforms where as soon as they get the donation, it will automatically sell it for cash, and then the cash is deposited in their account to make sure that they can secure the value of the donation so that they don't, let's say, get a big donation and then, the next day there's something that happens and it drops 10% in value, right? So a lot of charities which, have their policies around accepting gifts and, certain risk management practices will just sell the cryptocurrency right away to lock in that value. So it's just another way of getting funds to your organization for your mission. And a lot of folks will say, well, what's the difference than just accepting money by credit card or PayPal?
That was my next question.
Yeah. One of them is that there are high fees that come with traditional donation platforms. Processing fees that come with credit card companies or payment processors, those sorts of things. So that's one piece of it. But I think the bigger piece of accepting cryptocurrency donations versus just plain old cash is that it opens you up to a new donor base, right? There's millions of folks. It's such a global space. When you look at like the top cryptocurrency adopters, it includes countries all over the world in Latin America, Asia, Africa. And it's a new generation of donors that embraces transparency and wants to know where their funds are going. And one of the cool things about, blockchain and cryptocurrency is that, and depending on the type of cryptocurrency, it's largely transparent and audible and easy to see kind of where the money is going, right? So by accepting cryptocurrency donations, you're making that statement as a charity as well that, we believe in and embrace transparency and technological innovation. And it brings you into this new space of potential donors. So there are many benefits to it for sure. One of them being the potential cost savings from fees. But I think the bigger one for me is that, you demonstrate as a charity that you believe in transparency and that you believe in innovation. And so that's why many charities are making the decision to accept cryptocurrency donations.
So the part I'm not understanding is if you trade, if you cash in your blockchain, Bitcoin or
Mhm.
Solera, whatever, there's a gas fee, there's a transaction fee. I guess it
Mhm.
depends what wallet it's in. Maybe some have smaller
Yeah,
fees.
it could depend what exchange you use. It could depend on the type of cryptocurrency for sure. So there are fees, of course, typically much lower than some of the larger giving platforms, which can when with all things considered be close to 15% when you look at credit card processing fees, admin fees, all those sorts of things, right? So again, that's one of the reasons, but certainly a smaller reason than I think that it opens you up to a brand new donor base and new generation of donors.
What
Mhm.
roles are NFT playing?
Yeah, for sure. So NFTs are really quite an interesting thing when it comes to social impact. And there's many different ways that NFTs are used through a social impact lens. So one of them is obviously fundraising, right? So NFTs or non-fungible tokens are essentially a proof of ownership of some sort of digital asset, whether it's like a piece of digital artwork or something like that. And so we're seeing there's been charities or groups that have auctioned off NFTs for funds to raise them for their organization. We've also seen many cases of large, well-known NFT artists selling their works and then donating proceeds, sometimes in the millions of dollars, to charitable organizations. A cool one that's an example of a group that's auctioned off NFTs for some sort of social impact cause is a group called NFT for Good, which sold a bunch of NFT trading cards of Asian celebrities with the proceeds, which were, I think, around $80,000, going to a group called Hate is a Virus, which is an Asian American and Pacific Islander oriented anti-racism nonprofit. So we're seeing things like that that are really neat. We're also seeing groups that are creating NFTs of maybe endangered species and then auctioning them off, and then the funds going to support endangered species. So we're seeing some really cool use cases in the NFT space. And beyond just fundraising, what's really neat about NFTs from a social impact point of view is that it creates a way for typically underserved groups in the art space to have an accessible entry point to being a professional artist or professional musician. You no longer have to go through a big record label or
Have an
through an art
agent
gallery.
and yeah, all of that.
Yeah, it gives you a way to just kind of directly bring your works to the public and to take ownership over it yourself, as opposed to just getting a small cut of the funds. If some sort of record label was selling your music, for example, you can mint it yourself, create an NFT, sell it and keep the proceeds yourself. So it's returning more of the funds to the artists as opposed to these intermediaries. So that's the role that I see NFTs playing when it comes to the social impact space.
I interviewed Tom Herman, who has gamified NFTs and who auctions off the NFTs, and then those are involved in voluntary carbon offsets. And he's using his site to educate kids about endangered species. So it's, I have seen a few things, but reading on your site and looking at your blog, I'm astounded that, this is so widespread. And I'm a little bit alarmed that there's not more media coverage of this area. And I think the media has an agenda, and that agenda is to sort of downplay, this whole thing, because it's maybe a little hard to understand. I'm not sure, but so what are some of the top crypto charities? And have, in other words, have groups have banded together in some cases to do good together.
Yeah, for sure. And first, to that point about the media, I would say that, yeah, it's definitely interesting. And you definitely see more of the, cryptocurrency is a scam, or it's the currency of criminals, or the environmental, the negative environmental impacts of some of them. But certainly there is a lot of, really real good being done in this space. And we certainly haven't seen that being covered to the level that it should be, right? And I think that it is really in its infancy. And although hundreds of, charities are accepting cryptocurrency donations, it still is a very small percentage in the broader scheme of things, right?
We're in very
And
early days.
yeah, exactly. And I read an interesting thing in a book called Bitcoin and the Future of Fundraising, which is really interesting. Definitely recommend reading it. Where it makes the kind of analogy to back in the early days of accepting credit card donations, that many charities initially were very skeptical didn't feel good about it, didn't do it for quite some time until it got to a point where, they had to, because everyone was, right? And I think that when it comes to charities, you're so often risk adverse and making sure that you're really handling your funds well, that you're really, everything's closely monitored and audited, and policies and procedures. And then I think it sometimes takes a lot of time to make that shift to the to new technologies, right? And I think that we're seeing that for sure. But anyways, going back to your question around some of the top crypto charities. So what I would say is, if you're looking for charities that are accepting cryptocurrencies, there are a couple different types of crypto charities, I guess you could say. There are those that just accept cryptocurrency donations, in which there are hundreds, and then there are those that actually have some sort of mission around that involves cryptocurrency, or blockchain, right? So, an example of that is Code to Inspire, is this amazing charity that's based out of Afghanistan that has created a school for girls and women in Afghanistan to help them learn how to code. But they also have in part of their curriculum, they teach about blockchain, cryptocurrency, those sorts of pieces to bring their students up to speed on that and to help them become developers in that space, which is really exciting. I mentioned UNICEF before, which is a big one, which is using cryptocurrency to fund many different projects. Save the Children formed a partnership with a large cryptocurrency called Cardano to fund one of their hubs, which is developing solutions in support of children and families in Africa. So those are just a couple that come to mind, but I'd recommend checking out a site like the Giving Block, where they have literally hundreds of these charities listed. Any type of charity you could think of, whether it's environmental, whether it's poverty reduction, homelessness, food security. There are charities that accept cryptocurrency donations, some that are very new to the space, some that have been doing it for years.
Are there charities that are devoted entirely to using crypto for good, as well as the ones that accept it?
Yeah, so I'd say it's maybe charity isn't the right word. There's a lot of startups and nonprofits that are using cryptocurrency and blockchain for good. An interesting example of this is, the World Food Program, one of the world's largest food security organizations, developed a program called Building Blocks, which was a blockchain-based platform for delivering aid to individuals in two refugee camps in Jordan. So Syrian refugees, they, instead of having to line up in a big line to get their cash payout or their voucher or whatever it is, they instead go to a grocery store, scan their iris, and then it automatically, based on the blockchain, brings up the funds that they have available that they can use to purchase groceries. So there's things like that. Yeah, there are platforms that are, directly providing aid from NGO to beneficiary in some sort of maybe like a stable coin. So that would be a cryptocurrency that is, pegged to maybe the US dollar, so it doesn't have like the same fluctuations that maybe a Bitcoin or something like that would, so that they don't have to go through a bank and wait days to process it. And, they can provide it directly to the beneficiary, in their mobile wallet. So we're seeing things like that, a lot of innovative startups that are making use of blockchain technology to provide aid, to provide universal basic income, to provide, funding directly to beneficiaries that are, whether it's refugees or victims of natural disasters, as opposed to having to go through the typical, bloated systems that would take much longer.
Oh, they are bloated. And I saw a post on your blog that was talking about using crypto to prevent having illicit drugs, having that's not the right word, having counterfeit drugs rather than the actual drugs, and so that by using the blockchain you can verify that this is the real thing.
Yeah, and I think that that's part of like a much bigger I guess subsector of blockchain and social impact, which is the supply chain side of things, right? There's so many cool projects out there that are using blockchain to enhance and make supply chains more efficient. So in theory, and let's use the example of fishing, tuna, let's say. There's no surprise that there's a lot of issues with large scale fishing operations, right? Where there's a lot of issues with bycatch and catching other types of fish, which then go to waste and stuff like that. And there's no real way to effectively monitor it. There's been a lot of criticism around, those like things like the dolphin safe labels and stuff like that. in theory, and there are groups that are working on these types of things, based on the blockchain, which is, immutable in a sense that it means that it's tamper-proof. There are organizations that are at every step of the supply chain. So let's use the fishing, for example. Where they're fishing, it gets uploaded to the blockchain. What they catch. Was there any bycatch? Was there any unanticipated things that they caught? How is it transported? How is it processed? So in theory, in the future, you could go and grab your can of tuna, scan the QR code, and get a full record of everything that's happened from the moment that it was, caught to the moment to being processed to being put on the grocery store shelf, right? And there are organizations that are working on these types of things, today. A really cool one is an organization called RISI, which I believe is out of Indonesia, if I'm correct, that is partnering with a cryptocurrency called VeChain, the VeChain Foundation, to track ocean plastic removal. And so essentially, there's multiple steps along the chain of where they go to remove the plastic, where it's processed, where it's transported, where it's recycled, and every step is saved on the blockchain so that you can then go on and verify that it has actually happened. So instead of an organization saying we removed 1 million tons of plastic, you can actually go on and see every step of the plastic removal process to verify that it actually happened. And so I think that's
remarkable change,
Yeah,
I mean, right
yeah.
now that allows you to become more socially responsible because you are able to make sure you're dealing with companies that are transparent for starters, but that are actually doing what they say they're doing, and you're getting what you wanted to get. So can you just tell us what's DAO, DAO, and how does it work with crypto, and how does it impact social good?
Yeah, so DAOs are what's called decentralized autonomous organizations, so DAO. And they're organizations that are created by developers that have really no centralized leadership. They're horizontal in a sense, and they're really driven by and governed by community members. And they are governed by a set of automated rules built into the protocol, the blockchain, which usually are called smart contracts, which enable these organizations to kind of run on their own without the need for that centralized leadership. So typically you maybe have a board of directors that would oversee an organization. Here, individuals that were interested in the mission of a certain DAO could purchase the tokens that represent that DAO, the governance tokens. And by holding these tokens, they are now a member of this organization and can vote and guide the future of that organization. So an example of this, let's say, so there are DAOs for many sorts of things, but let's say that there's a DAO that wants to fund carbon removal projects, okay? They might sell some sort of token that, carbon token or something like that. So to be a part of this DAO, you buy this carbon token and you're now a member, okay? And so then you can use your membership rights to vote on, let's say that each token you buy, 10% goes into a pool, which is donated to a charity that removes carbon. You can then vote on which charities to support, which projects to support, those types of things. So it really puts the decision making in the hands of the community, and there's no really central body that oversees it per se. So we're seeing different use cases for DAOs. We're seeing ones that are fundraising for different charitable causes. We're seeing ones that are kind of venture capital in a sense that will support startups where the members can vote on which startups they want to fund. We're seeing DAOs that are kind of like think tanks in a sense, where you get rewarded for publishing works around a certain social cause, those sorts of things. So really, in a nutshell, DAOs are an organization that is governed by those that hold the tokens to the organization, as opposed to it being governed by a centralized body.
How much can that be manipulated by people who have a lot of money, I guess?
Yeah, I mean, in a sense it could. A lot of DAOs are quite large. And so it'd be quite difficult to do that because you would need to obviously own like a large percentage of the coin. So there have been times in the past where, certain blockchains have been the victims of what's called a 51% attack, where 51% of the, the miners or the validators are able to do something to change the blockchain or to do some sort of fraudulent activity, but it's usually extremely costly. And so it's not something we've seen happen a lot in the past, and especially with DAOs. So it is possible.
Traceable.
Yeah, exactly. It is possible, but it is, highly unlikely.
So, Drew, what do you think has to happen to increase the focus on crypto for social impact? I mean, what will it take for more people to know about it, to understand? I know that's your mission, is to get that
Mhm.
information out there, but what do you think it's going to take?
Yeah, I think, really what it comes down to is that, and this is my mission, is just showing the good that's being done, right? Most of the stuff in the space is around maybe the investment side of things, right? Cryptocurrency is an investment is where a lot of the coverage from the media is, and the volatility, oh, the crypto crash, or crypto's rallying, those sorts of things, or the not so great things, right? That Bitcoin mining takes a lot of energy, and so there's those environmental impacts, or that yes, sometimes ransomware attacks will use cryptocurrency. So there are those things that that the media will like to cover, right? Because it is it's something that will draw in the views, right? It'll draw in the readers. It'll build their audience. But really, there's so much good being done in this space that we need to shine a light on. Like, there's a reason that these massive charities are starting to accept cryptocurrency donations. That that there's billions of dollars flowing into social impact projects in the space to work on a number of important causes. That groups all over the world and some of the largest NGOs are getting on board and saying this is something we need to back. Even the United Nations has stated that despite some of the challenges with the environmental side of things, that crypto can and blockchain can play an essential role in combating climate change. So there needs to be more of an emphasis on those pieces. And it's just about building an understanding in the space, right? It is something that a lot of people are turned off from when they hear cryptocurrency or blockchain. They think that they have to be a computer science major who has years of experience coding to understand it.
Or that they
Whereas,
have to be rich.
yeah, exactly.
You
Whereas I have
don't.
no tech background, right? And
Yeah.
I'm by no means an expert in the tech side of things, but I'm able to look at kind of the intersection between the tech and the social impact stuff. So there's a lot of great resources out there to help educate people that are really accessible and easy to understand. And I think one thing that's really cool about this space is that given that there is a real emphasis on transparency and open source and community when it comes to blockchain and cryptocurrency, is that there are so many amazing free resources out there, courses, podcasts, ebooks, blogs that will help educate people in a way that's accessible. And so I'm just trying to shine a light on that good. And there are many others that are as well, to change the narrative from, crypto and blockchain is this scary thing that's being driven by a bunch of shadowy people with nefarious motives, to really something that is a technology that can revolutionize so many different aspects of our lives for the better.
Well, I think that's exciting. And you're about to launch a podcast, right?
Yes. We're working on launching a podcast in the near future where we're looking to bring on some of these developers that are working on really cool projects, to bring on some of the charities that are accepting cryptocurrency donations, and some of the groups that are working to use the technology to make the world a better place. So we're excited to launch that in hopefully the not so distant future, and to help again shine to a different venue for bringing these stories to people beyond just the blog.
I will put links to your site, your Twitter. There is such a wealth of good information on your site. I mean, I know that your site is new, relatively speaking, but you've already populated it with quite a lot of wonderful information. And I think that if anybody really does want to learn more about the social impact of crypto, it's a good place to start. And it will also point you, as it did me, in the direction of other organizations that you might want to know about. So I really want to thank you. I learned a lot today, and I think everyone who listens will have learned a lot as well. And so thanks so much for taking the time.
Yeah, absolutely. And what I will say too is that, when it comes to this topic, it's hard to cover everything and the technology behind it. So don't be afraid to dig into it, to read. There's a lot of great people in the space that'll help you out. There's a lot of great content. So just get in there, start reading, start learning about it. And I think you'll be surprised with all the great work being done in the space. And thank you so much, BL, for having me. It's been a pleasure. And I've really enjoyed our conversation.
Thank you.